I was sitting in the most pivotal board meeting of my entire career, surrounded by power players, when my phone let out a sharp buzz that fractured my focus. The group text on the screen was from my younger brother, Logan. It read, "Don't bother showing up for the housewarming steakhouse party this weekend. Vanessa says your corporate stench will ruin the celebratory vibe for everyone." I watched, paralyzed, as my parents, Arthur and Diane, instantly spammed the heart and like icons on that message, a digital firing squad publicly endorsing my humiliation. My pulse hammered in my ears as I typed a single, cold word, "Understood." My colleagues watched me from across the Italian marble conference table, their eyes searching for a weakness. What they didn't realize was that the family drama they were witnessing was about to hit a brick wall. They didn't know that I, Ethan, was Logan's boss at Vanguard Global, the company he had managed to land a job at only 4 days ago. The entitlement was about to face an office reveal they would never forget. The hum of the ventilation system in my executive suite felt like a low, persistent headache as I watched the gray Seattle mist swallow the Space Needle. At 35 years old, I had ascended to the role of Senior Vice President of Strategy at Vanguard Global, a position I had essentially bled for. My journey wasn't paved with family connections or trust funds. It was built on a foundation of 18-hour days, missed holidays, and a relentless pursuit of excellence that left me physically exhausted but professionally untouchable. Yet, despite the high-stakes corporate management I handled daily, I remained the invisible sun in the eyes of Arthur and Diane. Logan was 4 years my junior, but in our family dynamic, he was the sun around which everything revolved. While I was taking out predatory student loans and working 3 part-time jobs to finish my MBA, Logan was discovering his soul on a 6-month trek through the Swiss Alps, entirely funded by our parents' retirement savings. When I finally landed my first 7-figure contract, the family celebration was a lukewarm 15-minute toast before my father pivoted to Logan's new visionary venture. Logan had a talent for failure that our parents mistook for artistic bravery. When his organic juice bar collapsed after 4 months, losing $50,000 of my parents' money, they threw him a courage to try gala that lasted an entire weekend. The pattern was a decade-long loop of chaos and rescue. Logan bounced from a failed crypto mining scheme to an attempt at being a high-end luxury watch broker, despite not knowing a movement from a battery. Each crash was softened by my parents' checks and a narrative that I, the successful one, was simply blessed with luck, while Logan was a misunderstood genius. My own milestones were treated like chores. When I closed on my first luxury penthouse, my mother simply sighed and said, "It's good you have a roof, Ethan. Now, can you help Logan with his car payment?" The irony of this current betrayal was suffocating. Just 5 days ago, Logan had called me, his voice trembling with a faux humility he usually reserved for asking for money. Vanessa, the woman he had married after a frantic 5-month romance, was putting the screws to him. She came from old Seattle wealth and had zero patience for a husband without a title. I felt a surge of misplaced protective instinct. I used every ounce of my professional integrity and backroom influence to bypass standard protocols and get him a position as a junior strategist in our firm. I even let him believe he got the job on his own merit, hoping it would finally spark some real ambition. I had even quietly footed the $35,000 bill for their wedding's designer floral arrangements and the open bar just months prior, all while Vanessa made snide comments about how I was married to my desk because no woman could stand my schedule. Now, staring at the group chat, the sting of my mother's comment was the sharpest. She accused me of spreading lies about Vanessa at the office, calling me jealous of Logan's new chapter. It was a calculated, venomous lie. I had barely acknowledged Logan's presence at work to maintain professional boundaries, yet here I was, being cast as the villain in a script written by the very people I was currently keeping afloat. I stared at my mother's text until the pixels seemed to burn into my retinas. Spreading rumors about Vanessa. It was a masterpiece of pure fiction. I had barely whispered her name within the walls of Vanguard Global. And even then, it was only to ensure that the background check for Logan was handled with extreme discretion. This wasn't just a simple family misunderstanding. It was a calculated betrayal of my character by the very people who had watched me grow into the man I was. I felt the cold weight of humiliation settle in my stomach, not because of the lie itself, but because my parents believed a 4-month stranger over their own son. Beatrice, my assistant of 22 years and the backbone of my corporate management style, knocked softly on the heavy oak door. "Ethan, the Sterling and Associates team is confirmed for the briefing in 20 minutes. I had to swallow the bitter taste of my family's silence and focus. This contract with Vivian Sterling was worth a staggering $25 million annually to our firm. It was the culmination of 8 months of exhausting strategy, travel, and absolute integrity. I couldn't let the ghost of a BBQ invitation haunt a boardroom. The next morning arrived with a classic Seattle wash charcoal skies and a biting, drizzly wind that mirrored my internal state. I had spent the night pacing my penthouse, trying to figure out how I became the villain in a story I was actually funding. I arrived at the office by 6 a.m., a full 90 minutes before the building truly breathed to life. Vanguard Global occupied the top 5 floors of a gleaming glass needle downtown, and from my 29th floor corner office, the ferries on Elliott Bay looked like slow-moving beetles. Beatrice was already there, a fresh folder in her hand. "Good morning, Ethan. The Sterling meeting is set for 10 a.m. in room A. But there's a slight complication. 2 people arrived 10 minutes ago in reception. They're demanding to speak with someone in senior leadership regarding management misconduct and a new hire." My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. Did they give names, Beatrice? A Logan Thompson and a woman who seems quite determined. They've mentioned potential workplace fraud and are insisting that Logan isn't receiving the status he deserves. They think someone is actively sabotaging his career. The irony was a physical weight. I had built the bridge for Logan to walk across, and now he was bringing a match to burn it while I was still standing on it. I instructed Beatrice to seat them in conference room B, the space reserved for visitors who haven't yet earned the executive elevator clearance. I had 2 hours before the biggest meeting of my life. I needed to handle this before the circus ruined the sanctuary. Conference room B was a cage of glass, mahogany, and leather. As I walked down the carpeted hallway, I could hear Vanessa's voice, sharp and crystalline, like ice breaking on a windshield. "Make sure you tell them your management material, Logan. Not some entry-level grunt. You have a title in your blood. Don't let them treat you like you're lucky to be here." I paused at the door, watching through the narrow gap. Logan looked small in the oversized leather chair, fidgeting with the silk tie I had bought him for Christmas. Vanessa was busy snapping photos of the Seattle skyline on her phone, likely gathering content for her social media, completely oblivious to the professional boundaries she was currently trampling. I took a breath and stepped inside. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crack the floor. "Ethan?" Logan stammered, his face turning a shade of pale that matched his shirt. "What? What are you doing here?" "I work here, Logan," I replied, my voice a flat, professional razor. "Actually, I'm the senior vice president of strategy. And this is my floor." Vanessa recovered with a speed that was almost impressive. Her face shifted from shock to a mask of practiced indignation in seconds. "Well, isn't this convenient? We don't need a manager. We have you. You can fix this junior mistake right now, Ethan. Logan needs to be moved to a director level. He has a degree, he has vision, and he certainly shouldn't be taking orders from nobodies in the marketing pool." I sat down across from them, maintaining the posture of a man who owned the air in the room. Logan is incredibly fortunate to have the analyst role he has, considering his varied employment history. It's a competitive position with room for actual growth. "Fortunate?" Vanessa's voice rose an octave. "He's your brother. He shouldn't be fortunate to work for you. He should be fast-tracked. He deserves preferential treatment, not this subtle discrimination you're practicing by keeping him in the basement." The accusation of discrimination hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I looked at Logan, who refused to meet my eyes. "Is this how you feel, Logan? That I'm discriminating against you by giving you a job you weren't qualified for?" Before he could even draw breath, Vanessa cut him off. "He feels exploited, Ethan. And if you don't have the authority to move him to an assistant manager role immediately, we'll go over your head. I'm sure your CEO would be fascinated to hear how the VP treats his own family when they're struggling to provide for their wives. She was threatening me in my own house." The betrayal was complete. I checked my watch. The Sterling team would be here soon. I was trapped between a $25 million deal and a family member who was prepared to use my own success as a weapon against me. The sharp, rhythmic buzzing of my phone on the mahogany table sounded like a countdown. A notification from Beatrice flashed across the screen. "Vivian Sterling has arrived 45 minutes early. She has a private jet leaving for London at 2 p.m. and wants to start the presentation immediately. Room A is prepped." The weight of the moment pressed against my ribs. This wasn't just a meeting. It was the anchor for our entire firm's fiscal year. If I landed the Sterling account, it meant job security for hundreds of employees under my corporate management. If I failed because I was refereeing a family squabble in a side office, I'd be professional toast. I have an urgent business matter that cannot wait, I said, standing up with a deliberate, slow grace. We will conclude this discussion after my meeting. Logan, I suggest you go to your desk and actually look at the orientation modules I bypassed HR to get you. Vanessa moved with the predatory agility of someone who had spent her life winning through intimidation. She stepped between me and the door, her designer heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. Oh no, Ethan, you're not going to brush us off like we're some inconvenient line item on a spreadsheet. Logan's dignity is more important than whatever big deal you're chasing. Family comes first. Or did Arthur and Diane fail to install that part of your soul? The sheer audacity of her words coming from the woman who had just helped my parents humiliate me on a public forum was almost enough to make me laugh. But I kept my face a mask of cold integrity. Vanessa, you are standing in a place of business. There are professional boundaries here that you are currently shattering. Stand aside. She didn't move. Instead, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I saw the signage in the lobby, Ethan. The Sterling Group. $25 million, isn't it? That's a lot of leverage. I wonder how Vivian Sterling would feel about partnering with a man who uses his power to settle petty childhood grudges against his only brother. Because if you walk out that door without promoting Logan, I'm walking into room A to tell them exactly what kind of leader you really are. I looked at Logan. He was staring at his shoes, his silence acting as a silent confession of his complicity. He was allowing his wife to sabotage the very person who had saved him from unemployment. In that moment, the last thread of my guilt snapped. I realized that my family didn't want my help. They wanted my submission. Try it, I said, my voice barely above a breath, yet cutting through her bravado like a winter wind. And you'll find out exactly how we handle security breaches at Vanguard Global. I walked back into room A with my heart hammering a war drum against my ribs, but my face remained as unreadable as a marble statue. I had exactly 12 minutes to win over Vivian Sterling and secure the $25 million future of Vanguard Global. Vivian was a legend in the industry, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and possessing a legendary no-nonsense meter that could detect a lie from a mile away. Everything settled, Ethan? She asked, her voice like velvet-wrapped steel. Just a minor friction with an unscheduled visitor, Vivian. Nothing that interferes with our commitment to your vision, I replied, smoothing my tie and diving straight into the implementation strategy. I focused on our quality control and integrity metrics, trying to drown out the memory of Vanessa's venomous threats. For 20 minutes, it worked. The rhythm of the boardroom took over, and I could see Vivian nodding in approval as I detailed our scalability. Then, the sanctuary was shattered. The double oak doors didn't just open. They hit the walls with a thunderous crack. Vanessa marched in, her face a mask of scarlet fury, with a bewildered Logan trailing behind like a ghost. Behind them, Beatrice was frantic, her hand over her mouth. I'm so sorry, Ethan, she pushed right past security. The silence in the room was absolute, the kind of heavy, pressurized quiet that precedes a storm. Vivian Sterling didn't move a muscle, but her eyes narrowed into icy slits of disapproval. Excuse me, Vanessa announced, her voice echoing off the glass walls. But I think your new partners need to know the truth about the man they're shaking hands with. Ethan isn't a leader. He's a petty, vindictive tyrant who uses his power to settle family drama at the expense of his own blood. I remained seated, my hands folded on the table. Vanessa, you are currently committing a security breach. I suggest you leave before building security arrives. Not until they hear how you've sabotaged Logan, she shrieked, pointing an accusing finger. He came to you for help, and you gave him the most insulting, low-level position just to keep him beneath your thumb. You're discriminating against your own brother out of pure, unadulterated jealousy because he has a life and a wife, and you have nothing but this cold office. Vivian Sterling stood up slowly, her presence filling the room with an ancient, terrifying authority. Young woman, you've made some incredibly serious claims of workplace fraud and discrimination. Do you have a single shred of evidence, or are you simply fond of making a spectacle of yourself? I don't need evidence. I know what he did. Vanessa barked, her confidence beginning to flicker as she realized the room wasn't siding with her. Victoria Vance, our CEO, who had been observing from the corner, finally stepped forward. Actually, we have plenty of evidence. We conducted a full HR investigation before hiring Logan as a favor to Ethan. Logan, your resume showed a consistent pattern of short-term failures and incomplete projects. In any other circumstance, our legal counsel would have flagged your application as a high-risk hire. Ethan didn't give you a low position to hurt you. He stretched our professional boundaries to give you a chance you hadn't earned. Vanessa's face went from red to a sickly, ashen gray. Logan looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Two members of our security escort team appeared in the doorway, their hands on their belts. The game was over. Vanessa's attempt to destroy my career had only succeeded in revealing her own desperate entitlement. "Ma'am," the lead of the security escort said, his voice a low, immovable rumble. "You need to exit the premises immediately, or we will be forced to involve the local authorities for trespassing and harassment." Vanessa looked around the room, her eyes darting like a trapped animal's. She looked for a hint of sympathy in the eyes of the board members, but she found only the cold, hard stare of professionals who saw her for exactly what she was, a liability. She tried to muster one last venomous remark, but her voice failed her. Logan, meanwhile, looked as though his soul had already left the building. He was a hollow shell, his head bowed, finally realizing that the power play his wife had engineered was actually a professional suicide note. As they were led out, the silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. The distant hum of the Seattle traffic below seemed like a world away. I took a slow, steady breath, adjusting my cufflinks. I didn't look at them as they passed. I couldn't. The man who had entered that room to help his brother had died 10 minutes ago. The man remaining was the senior vice president of Vanguard Global. "I offer my sincerest apologies for that theatrical display," I said, looking Vivian Sterling directly in the eye. "It was an administrative failure on my part to allow my personal history to bleed into this sacred space. I can assure you that our legal counsel is already drafting a formal restraining order to ensure such a breach never occurs again." Vivian didn't respond immediately. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled under her chin. The tension in the room was a living thing. Then, slowly, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. "Actually, Ethan, in my 40 years of navigating high-stakes business, I've learned that you truly judge a partner's character not by their smooth sailing but by how they navigate a hurricane. Most men would have crumbled or lost their temper. You maintained your integrity under a level of pressure that would have shattered a lesser leader. That kind of grace is exactly what the Sterling Group looks for in an ally." Victoria Vance, our CEO, nodded in solemn agreement. Ethan's ability to uphold professional boundaries even when his own blood was attempting to weaponize them is the reason he holds the keys to this firm's strategy. "We don't just hire for talent here. We hire for ironclad character." The meeting didn't just resume, it accelerated. Vivian was so impressed by the handling of the crisis that she signed the preliminary $25 million agreement right there on the mahogany table, her fountain pen scratching a definitive end to my morning's nightmare. As we shook hands, I felt a strange mixture of absolute vindication and a profound, hollow sadness. I had won the war, but I had lost a brother. Or perhaps, I realized, I had lost the illusion of a brother. As the Sterling team departed, Vivian paused at the door. "One last thing, Ethan. The greatest kindness you can offer a person like your brother isn't a promotion they didn't earn. It's the consequences they've spent their whole lives avoiding. You didn't fail him today. You finally gave him the gift of reality." The signatures on the Sterling contract were barely dry before the next wave of the avalanche hit. Landed a $25 million deal was a career high, but the personal fallout was a dark, winding tunnel I was forced to navigate. In the weeks that followed, the silence in the hallways of Vanguard Global felt heavy, charged with the residual electricity of that boardroom explosion. Logan returned to work 48 hours later, a ghost of the man who had marched in with Vanessa. He was subdued, his arrogance replaced by a visible, bone-deep embarrassment. To his credit, he realized he couldn't stay in strategy. He requested a transfer to the Logistics and Fleet Management Department, a gritty, high-pressure environment far removed from executive suites. I supported the move through our HR investigation protocols, seeing it as his first real step toward developing genuine integrity. But while Logan was trying to rebuild, his marriage was incinerating. As the layers of Vanessa's life were peeled back, the old Seattle heiress persona vanished, revealing something far more predatory. It turned out Vanessa wasn't from old money. She was from a long line of nomadic grifters, and Logan was simply her latest mark. He confessed to me, in a broken voice over a plastic cup of lukewarm office coffee, that Vanessa had married him purely because of his connection to me. She had been selling access to her inner corporate circle on private messaging apps, charging thousands for consultations on how to manipulate high-net-worth relatives for personal gain. The true horror surfaced when our security escort lead handed me a digital file. While I was in the boardroom, our surveillance had caught Vanessa in a restricted corridor. She wasn't just pacing. She was systematically taking high-resolution photographs of our proprietary client lists and internal corporate management flowcharts. This wasn't just a wife having a tantrum. It was industrial espionage. We handed the evidence over to our legal counsel, who immediately involved federal investigators. The deep dive revealed that Vanessa's social media empire was actually a front for a sophisticated fraud ring. She had been coaching women across the country on how to commit identity theft and wire fraud by leveraging their partners' professional networks. In 3 separate cases, her students had drained the retirement accounts of unsuspecting in-laws. Vanessa wasn't just a toxic family member. She was a felon. She was arrested 3 days later at a high-end spa, ironically using a credit card she had opened in Logan's name without his knowledge. She was facing multiple counts of conspiracy and grand larceny. Logan was devastated, realization dawning on him that every "I love you" from Vanessa had been a calculated business expense. The divorce was finalized in record time, but the financial wreckage she left in Logan's name would take years to clear. 6 months have passed since that icy morning in the boardroom, and as I sit here in my office overlooking the Puget Sound, I realize that the group text that was meant to be my social execution was actually my liberation. The $25 million sterling deal didn't just transform Vanguard Global's bottom line. It shattered the glass ceiling of my own self-worth. I was promoted to senior managing partner, but the true wealth I've acquired isn't found in my stock options or my new corner office. The real transformation happened in the quiet corners of our family. The long-delayed Christmas barbecue finally took place last month, hosted by Arthur and Diane at the old family home, but the atmosphere was unrecognizable. There were no snide remarks, no whispered comparisons, and most importantly, no Vanessa. My parents had undergone a grueling period of self-reflection. They finally admitted that by constantly bailing Logan out, they hadn't been loving him, they had been crippling him. They apologized, not just for the text, but for decades of taking my resilience for granted while enabling his stagnation. Logan is thriving now in the logistics trenches. Without the toxic fog of Vanessa's status games, he's discovered he actually has a talent for problem-solving and a genuine work ethic. He's dating a woman named Sarah, a schoolteacher who finds his stories about the shipping docks fascinating rather than low-class. For the first time, he isn't looking for a shortcut. He's looking for a legacy. I've learned that the greatest act of love you can offer a family member isn't unconditional accommodation, it's unconditional truth. By refusing to compromise my integrity, I forced everyone around me to raise their own standards. Sometimes, you have to burn the bridge of peace at any price to build a foundation of mutual respect. Success isn't just about the title on your door. It's about the peace in your heart when you know you stood your ground. What about you? Have you ever felt the crushing weight of family expectations clashing with your own values? Have you ever had to say no to someone you love to save yourself? I'd love to hear your stories of setting boundaries and finding your own voice in the comments below. Your experiences might be the lifeline someone else needs to hear today. If Ethan's journey to justice resonated with you, please consider liking this video. It truly helps our stories reach those who need them most. And don't forget to subscribe to Grandma Revenge Stories for more deep dives into the complex world of family, work, and the power of standing tall. Share this with a friend who might be struggling to find their own no. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Remember, your worth is never up for negotiation, and the right people will always respect the boundaries you draw. Until next time, keep your head high and your integrity higher.